Hi, everybody. Good evening. Nice to have you here. Hi, guys. Just so you know, ahead of time, sometimes people, when they begin talking, they say, oh, in the green room when we were back, we weren't talking. I was just crying. I was just sitting in front of you, weeping this incredible memoir. It's the first time that we're in person together, and it's really such an honor and a privilege to have you here with us, Rachel, really. And I'm sure all of you as well. Wow, what a profoundly powerful memoir you have written. Again, I feel a bit challenged to be eloquent about something without sounding fawny and fanny, but your choice to write this memoir, it's obviously not your genre, and prose itself is kind of questionable for someone whose medium is a bit less linear. And so what was it that moved you to write this, and why now? Yeah.
So thank you for having me, first of all, and thank you for everybody for coming. Indeed, I'm a poet, and all of my books have been poetry books. It's an odd moment to find myself in because people are reacting to this book as though it's the first book I've ever written, which is not the case. But poetry resides very much on the margins. When I published my last poetry collection, the title of the poetry collection was "What Use is Poetry? The Poet is Asking." And it was not a rhetorical question. It was a genuine question from a genuine place of a failure of faith. And pretty much at the same time, this memoir announced itself to me. Mamash kacha, exactly that way. It announced itself to me. And it said, this is the next book you need to write. It was clear to me that it would be in prose. It was clear to me that it could not be exclusively in poetry, though, of course, I inserted as much poetry as I possibly could. The reason that it had to be in prose was twofold. First of all, in my life living with depression, there have been memoirs that have saved my life, and they were prose memoirs. I don't know of any poetry memoir. And I wanted my memoir to be of use. I wanted it to reach where it could reach and to speak where it could speak. And I've lived with straightforward poetry for enough years to know that it challenges people in a way that can feel frightening. So I knew that it would be a prose memoir. And the second matter is the trajectory of 30 years that I needed. While the memoir is not linear or chronological, and I've already heard from a reader or two that they find the nonlinearity challenging. That's okay, I can live with that. I still needed the type of narrative arc that prose would allow and poetry would not. So that's why this book came into being, and I started it in pretty much it's almost 6 years ago, in the winter of 2020.
One of the things that you just said that really touched me on the book being of use and how the books had saved you. You speak to that frequently in the memoir.
Yeah.
Was the whole throwing yourself into the entire memoir or depression memoir genre, that whole. One of the things, though, that you return to over and over again is the impassable chasm between the depressed experience and the ability to convey that or communicate that. And in that way, it kind of like, of what use is this book if there's a chasm that can't be fully, but somewhere in that loneliness, right? Somewhere in there is, how did you work with that? Like, you're speaking in such intimate ways in the book.
You're right. There's a paradox there, and it's a profound one. That my experience of living with depression is that the attempt to describe depression in traditional narrative terms fails. I think I say this somewhere in the memoir. It doesn't have rising action. It doesn't have climax. It doesn't have resolution. It just is. And we expect those, narrative structures, which is a big reason why there's so much poetry in this memoir. So the paradox is there without a doubt. Having said that, I can remember with complete clarity the moment that William Styrone's book, Darkness Visible, ended up in my hands. I can remember the dust motes in the room. It's that level of resolution, and it felt to me that while his experience was profoundly different from what I was living, it was familiar enough that it provided me with saving, companionship, acknowledgement, everything that one needs when one's in that place. So, yes, the paradox is there, without a doubt.
And yet, I will say, as someone who had my own struggles with depression and my own struggles with that inner world, this spoke to me so frequently and found me in so many places. And so I was also taken very deeply by the way you decided to structure the book. It's a very unique structure. Do you mind speaking to that and explaining some of what was behind that?
Yeah. Yes, I'm happy with the structure of the book. I am. The book is, I've read many depression memoirs in my life, and some of them have left lasting impressions and others have not. But I knew that when I would sit down to write mine, it would not be a traditional narrative. I just knew that it wouldn't be something I could do or wanted to do. And the book is structured with, it has an architecture to it built on different structural elements, and I can name them for you. The first and perhaps the most organizing structural element is the myth of Persephone and Demeter. It's the hymn to Demeter, which is an ancient text of 500 lines. That's how long it is. It's not a very long text, but it tells the story of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, being abducted into the underworld and then having to live half a year in the underworld and coming back to the upper world. And of course, this is the way the ancients described this, understood or gave reason for the changes in the seasons and the cyclical nature of that she does that every year. She's the only one who does it every year. She goes back into the underworld. So one of the primary structural elements of the book is indeed the hymn to Demeter, which I open with it, I end with it, I return to it. I must have read it 50 times. Every time I would start a new chapter, I would go back and reread the hymn to Demeter, and miraculously, each time I would discover something new that I hadn't seen before. It's also a text I teach, meaning I've been teaching it for 30 years, and I would still, every time, discover something. Mamash. Mamash kaha. And that's one of the structural elements. The myth just keeps on weaving it together. The second structural element, it's less structural, but it's a very important organizing feature, is what I've called cairns. Which, is that a word known in English? Do people know it? Yeah, it is.
Depending on who you're speaking to.
Okay.
But yes.
Cairns rujum. It's a rujum. You're my Israelis. Exactly. Rujumim. And can't actually remember when or how that idea came to me. It feels like it was one of those gifts one receives, where I understood that my chapters would be punctuated with cairns, which are these stone markers that serve many purposes. For me, they are, and I'm sure every one of you has these, those of us who are older, the memories that are solid in your mind. You've forgotten everything else, but that memory you remember. And it's a cairn in the landscape of your life. So I have throughout the chapters cairns that are punctuating the narrative. And the third element, which I'm happy for and committed to, is the poetry. And it's a lot of Dickinson. How could it not be? But it's also some of my poetry integrated into the telling. And other poets, Louise Gluck and Sylvia Plath, poets who have accompanied me and have been important to me, and poets that I think people who don't usually read poetry might also benefit from. So that's the third element.
I was very struck by the cairns because someone who works with words and letters and words and structure, that you know this very well, that in the Jewish mystical tradition, letters are called avanim, right? And so words.
I didn't.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't.
Wow!
No.
In the book
Avanim
in Sefer Yetzirah, in the 3rd to 6th century quasi magical mystical work, each letter is called an even or avanim, like stones, and rearranging them is part of the work of the book of Sefer Yetzirah, working with the stones, with the cairns, as it were.
I didn't know that. I'm glad to learn it. Thank you.
There you go.
There you go.
Very interesting. Another part of the structure of the book, though, maybe not the structure that you mentioned, but each of the paragraphs are kind of these cairns, and you're approaching various pieces. I found them fascinating, like the origin story that you begin to look for, because your depression is essentially, as you called it in the book, postpartum blues was what people spoke of about depression in postpartum context. And so it's with the birth of Daniel, your first son, your first child, that this presence begins to make its way towards you, that you later know is postpartum depression or depression, clinical depression. But as you wrote, it's not blues for you, it's postpartum black.
Yeah.
Right. It's and there's really no literature, at least, right? It's always supposed to be the book that accompanied you for your pregnancy, right? What to expect when you're expecting. Right. And what you wrote powerfully is, when the pregnancy was over, the book was over, and you were in the land. And so you go searching for the origin story.
Yeah.
And what accompanies that chapter is a beautiful, intensely beautiful poem about Bria, that's yours, right?
Yeah, that's mine.
So what was that like for you to begin to look for origins in your
Yeah. I should have included that as one of the structural elements. Indeed, there is the search for an origin story, and I send this back out to all of you with whatever it is that you're carrying in your lives. How to search for the origin story of whatever that is, and then to tell it. I think that those origin stories are tremendously. They're just so profoundly helpful. So indeed. I learned pretty late that there is something that happened to me when I was an infant, but I learn it late. I learn it when my second son is born, and when I learn it, then I understand this is what I have to research more, and I have to investigate it in order to have a story to tell about why, think about Persephone. Persephone is this beautiful maiden in the field, and she is suddenly ripped into the underworld. And usually when we read the hymn to Demeter, Demeter, her mother, is the one who is seen as the depressed person. Now, it makes sense for Demeter to be depressed. Her daughter has been taken from her, and she's bereft and furious. But what has pulled Persephone into the underworld, into darkness? There's no apparent reason. That's what makes her so useful to me, is this notion that it isn't apparent, and so you have to research it and understand it, and basically in the end you're building your own story so that you have a place to put your feet and stand on something in the life that you're living. Yeah.
And so in your own story, though, what you uncover is... is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay. It's in the book.
Right.
What I uncover, I'm nursing my second child, and I'm having a moment of what feels like intimacy with my mother, Alea Shalom, and I ask her about when I was born and the period after that, and what I discover is that she basically, I'll use the word because it's in the book, she basically abandoned me when I was born. She went off to another city in order to be with her dying mother, and left her baby and her 3 older children, who were all under the age of 6, behind. But she left the infant behind also. And when I asked her, so Ima, who took care of me? So she looked at me, I'm looking at Haley, and she looked at me and she said, who did take care of you? And it was like a moment where she really wondered about it, and then she quickly collected herself and she said, well, there were always hands around. And that
13-year-old, there was a 13-year-old.
There was a 13-year-old who was very capable beyond her. She was capable beyond her years.
Yeah.
And it was for me, it was a very important moment to learn that. And this was already 3 years into my own depression, and understanding how the body, holds onto that. I didn't know it, but I knew it. I knew that there was a blackness.
Yeah, I'm just so taken by this vignette, the story on the stage, in this setting, the story in the book, the story as you tell it just now, and the laughter it elicits from me and from others, and the smile on your face. And it's not such a smiley moment. When I read the story, and it's like what happens, again, in the performance of ourselves in the world. It's like here you're telling this story, you're in front of people who are sympathetic to the story, so we're all friends.
Yeah.
We know that our parents are, our parents, and that's what, as you said, it's apparent, and they're apparent. Yeah. And at the same time, like you discover this story and it just lands, because your mother was taking, for me, and how great you are as a writer. I mean, phenomenal writing. You took me into the entire gestalt where your mother's telling the story and she's telling it from her perspective. It's a story for your mother about her gallant. She's with her mother and.
But that was a real learning moment for me, because I was listening to my mother tell the story and I got very engaged in my own emotional listening. Oh my God, I am that infant and I have been abandoned and I never knew the story, and now maybe I can make sense of it. And then as my mother proceeds with the story, I understand in that moment that the story I'm hearing is different from the story she is telling. The story she is telling is the story of sitting by her mother for months and months while her mother was dying, and she was alone next to her mother. And for my mother, and my brother and sister are here, our mother, the story is that she was faithful and devoted, and her brother wasn't there next to her. And then on the day, September 1st, she goes off to have a cup of coffee, or probably now it's probably tea, and she's away from her mother's bed for an hour, and she comes back and she sees her brother next to her mother, and her mother has died in her brother's presence. And my mother was robbed. That's her story. The baby who's in Buffalo, she's an incidental.
Okay.
Okay.
And so does that, as a father of young children now, or not so young, some but the constant navigating of the story that you're in and the story that will be told and who will tell the story and whether you can control that or you can heal it or you can do tikkun, which is not a word that your daughter in particular likes. But you then, in the latter part of the story, I wondered how much of what happens later in the book you want to speak to, because you wind up doing something that I think many parents would be afraid to do, and I found it incredibly courageous and moving, is that you wind up interviewing your own 3 children about what it was like to have you as their mother.
Yeah.
And I wondered if the connection between those two moments, like interrogating, you discover that your mother's story, that is this seminal story for her, that she was robbed, and meanwhile you're the incidental, and now how you try to center your children's narrative and give them a voice is very interesting.
So that was beautifully said. Thank you. I learned from a therapist not too long ago. She said to me and to my partner Yanni, she said, "You have to understand that every generation is getting better at demanding what they need, and they are, as a result, making us better as parents." And I've taken that. And I feel all I really wanted from my mother was an acknowledgement. She couldn't do that, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay at this point. It is what it is. We do what we can do,
Right.
and with my children, I know that they also have been robbed. They were robbed. They were robbed of a well mother. They didn't have a well mother. And when I knew I had to write a chapter about my children, I knew, it's called The Dark-Robed Mother. There are so many dark-robed mothers, and you have...
Can you speak to that?
So the Dark-Robed Mother is actually... The memoir had a different title. That was the title that I worked with for 3 years, and it was a really bad title.
What was it?
Really?
Come on.
Really?
Why
Okay.
not?
Okay. And I knew it was a bad title, and I just couldn't get past it. It was, and my children also told me it was a bad title. The title was Darkness in Descent. Okay, it's a bad title. I know. Okay, all right. So when the book was already in production, and I have a wonderful editor at Wesleyan University Press. She's a gift, Susanna Tamanin. I said to her, Susanna, I know this is a terrible title. I don't know what to do. About a few hours later, she wrote me back and she said, "So what do you think of The Dark-Robed Mother?" And the reason why she chose, or why she offered it in a very, gentle way, is that's one of the epithets that Demeter is given. Demeter is called the Dark-Robed Mother. That's who she is. I was like, oh my goodness, how is it that I did not see that? And then, of course, there is, the layers of dark-robed mothers. There's me, the dark-robed mother. There's my mother, the dark-robed mother. There's Demeter, the dark-robed mother, and they're all there together. I hope my children will not be dark-robed mothers or fathers. I hope they won't be. So I knew that I had to include a chapter on my children and allow their voices to be present. And it was clear that I could not tell their stories for them. It was obvious to me I couldn't do it. And so I interviewed them, and it was wonderful. I recommend it to all of you. Mamash. it's a great thing to do.
It's an amazing thing to do.
It's a great thing to do.
There are all these apps and things now for interviewing your parents, right?
No,
The sense
interview
that-
your children.
Right.
Interview your children. My second son taught me how to record them on my iPhone. He and then I just set out, and I think I had 2 sessions with each of them, and they went on for hours, and it was all on. It was all recorded, and they were very forthcoming, and I think they were kind of charmed by the whole situation
And the invitation. Yeah.
The invitation, yeah, and they were also very different from each other.
Well, it's one of the things you say in the book is that we all know that to be the case, that we all grew up in different homes and have different mothers and different fathers, and that was your experience. Just
and then when I do have to admit that it's their voices, but they speak, with the exception of Danielle, my eldest, the other 2 spoke only in Hebrew. So it's their voices in Hebrew, which then I have to translate into English, and then I'm also transcribing it. So there is, me getting in the way. When I had the chapter finished, I sent it to all 3 of them, and I said to them, okay, so now you tell me, is this okay? Does anything need to be changed? What do you think? And each one of them responded very differently, but very honestly. I mean, Talia, my daughter, who is very pedantic, she told me some of the words I chose in translation were not good enough. And that, I could do better here, and this could be more exact. And of course, we sat with the text and went back and forth. Ariel, my second son, there were things he wanted me to take out, which was fine. It was really fine. And I was happy to have them, be part of that. And I think they were okay with it. I think, yeah. It seems so.
One of the things that you clarify and articulate so, I think, with great heart and with great courage is what it's like to pass. Mm-hmm. Right, to use that phrase, I think, what was the name? David Karp. David Karp.
Yeah.
The notion of passing, that the blunt force of an object, right? The soldier, the wounded soldier whose wounds are on the inside, but with a sharper object, it would be more visible on the outside, but with a blunt instrument. And so people who have depression, who are functional, who have great competency, and you were someone who, at various points in the memoir, speak almost enviously of people who have had major breakdowns. Yeah. That had you had a complete and total breakdown, it would have been easier than being as functional and as competent as you were. Can you speak to that experience?
It's a really important element. That one of the reasons. Look, there are shelves and shelves of depression memoirs. Who needs another depression memoir? Really, really. But I felt in my reading of depression memoirs that I didn't see myself represented, and the piece of me that I didn't see represented, and I know I'm not unique at all, is exactly this: high functioning, or passing, or smiling depression. And I think that we are, as a group, underrepresented because it's so hard to hold on to. I've heard from friends of mine, dear friends, who have said almost critically, well, you were just looking like everything was okay. How could we show up for you if everything looked like it was okay? And I get it, I really do. The high functioning aspect is it's getting a little bit more attention. One of the stories I mention in the memoir is Kate Spade. Kate Spade, who I didn't know her. I didn't know her bags, or a fashion designer, and very, very successful, and nobody knew. And then she committed suicide, and I think that is a real thing, and that the depression memoirs I've read and that have really been drawn to, whether it's Styron or Andrew Solomon's Tome, which is there's always this moment where the suffering person disintegrates on the floor and is absolutely non-functioning, and somebody comes in and wraps her up in a blanket and holds her and feeds her soup, and indeed, exactly as you said, I would read those passages with a lot of envy, like halavai lalai, I would like that.
Halavai, I mean,
Halavai. I wish I
would that it were like
but it
that.
wasn't me, and I did not miss a lecture, and I didn't, miss a faculty meeting, and
You were pulling yourself out of bed to go pick up the children
to
and
go
then
pick
crawling back into bed.
but the children knew, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Even at one point in the memoir, you write that Talia comes to you at some point and she's crying and or you see that she has words that if she doesn't speak them, you say it'll strangle her. She'll be.
Did I read it?
Sure. Is
I
it
read
one of
it.
the?
It is one.
Oh, it
It's
was.
one of the passages. I'm going to read it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
I'm
Yeah.
going to read it. It's cairn. It's one of the cairns. It's cairn 10. It's 2019. My youngest child, my daughter, Talia, is 20 and a soldier, starting the second year of her mandatory 2-year military service. She's been struggling with her role in her officers, struggling with herself, and struggling with me. The struggle with me is already a few years old, from the middle of high school, from when Talia started pulling herself away from the intertwined unit we had previously been. It was then she began searching for herself, not in relation to me, and began searching also for ways to understand, acknowledge, and express the anger she has towards me, her difficult and sometimes depressed mother. Today she's home on army leave, and I find her in the TV room. A seemingly mundane exchange between us flares up into a vocal altercation. The details are lost to me, only the feelings remain, and what comes next. From within the context of whatever I've just said to her, or in response to my anger, or was it my tears, or maybe it was both, or neither, Talia's lovely cheeks become flushed, and she speaks the following. I have to say something to you. I have to, but I can't. There's a sudden silence in the cave-like room built into the stone hillside. It's a silence that is slowly pushing the crowded and angry sounds still lingering in the room toward the open door. The silence feels to me like an opening to a secret place. I've been standing. I sit down now on the edge of the couch, not far from her, but also not touching. I tell her she can say anything. She can say everything. I can see that she's afraid of the words she longs to speak, afraid of what they might do to me, afraid they might destroy me. I can also see that the words she longs to speak and hasn't yet spoken are sitting in her throat, and they will strangle her if she doesn't speak them now to me. I tell her again, this time more emphatically, she can say anything, and she must say whatever it is she needs to say. In a somewhat breathless voice, she says, I can't live with your disease anymore, Mama. I just can't. That is all she needed to say. The words hover in the space between us, like those tiny black-arrowed birds a child draws on the page, in the sky above a square house. I nod my head and say, yes, I can understand that. I watch the flush of her cheeks recede. I can hear her breathing settle. The black-arrowed bird's words are no longer filling her throat and choking her. I'm so glad she's let them out. And though she hasn't told me anything I don't already know, I'm also filled with sadness. The sadness is for my daughter suffering and for how I have failed her. The sadness is for myself too. In my daughter's eyes, at this moment in her life, I am my illness. That is all I am.
It's amazing that you also drew attention earlier in the memoir to the to home and the unhomed and the abyss and the home, and I feel as though you're witnessing and your courage in laying bare what happens in intimate circles between mother and child, and more intimately even in your own heart mind, as you say that you feel that you failed, is a gift to people who also experience home sometimes as the abyss, as the to home, as that the chasm there between the expectation. And I was so moved when you wrote about the altercation that began with something mundane, before you know it, the very thing you want, which is connection, is disconnection. And then what ensued, though, was a healing moment where you offered for your daughter a chance to say the thing that she needed to say, and to have a mother who was strong enough to hear that. That's a pretty amazing vignette. So thank you.
I have to say that thank you, but I use the word healing very cautiously because it's a long journey, and it's not linear, and it's complicated, but we're on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The myth of Persephone, you write later in the book that one of the things that you mentioned it already this evening, but in the book you mentioned that of all of you had been surrounded, Greek mythology was something that was so alive for you from a very young age. You were sensitive in ways that you were called the sensitive one, right, in your family?
Yeah, though my brother thinks he was the sensitive one,
Oh,
but it was me.
Okay, some sensitivity there. That's great. But you said about yourself that you were kind of lacking some emotional, epidermis.
Epidermis.
And so, but you were already drawn to these stories, the mythology, and you mentioned that Persephone. What you didn't notice about her until later on, and it connected to depression for you, was that Persephone it's an annual trek to the underworld. Like she doesn't go down and come back up again. The redemption story is cyclical. It is ever recurring, and that has been your experience also with depression. That you came to a point where living with depression or living with the disease was something that was difficult to come to, but that was important for you. You can speak to that identity.
Yeah. I wouldn't use the word redemption. I just won't use it. It feels like it's too grand of a word. It's so grand. I mean, it's also, my daughter doesn't like the word tikkun. I think we're in the same school because it feels, it's like if only, but it's so much bigger than what we actually are living. But there are shifts, and there are small correctives, and there are acceptances, and it's amazing to me. I taught the Persephone and Demeter myth for years and years, and I never noticed how the relentlessness of it. And then when I noticed the relentlessness of it, I also understood she's the only one of all of the Greek figures who go to the underworld and come back. She's the only one who does it every year, which is so unbearable. It's harsh. It's cruel. It's suffering. But even with her, I also understand that there are shifts. And towards the end of the memoir, in like the 55th rereading of the hymn to Demeter, I noticed that there's another figure in the story. It's Hecate, and she accompanies Persephone in her return to the underworld. That's going to make me cry. It's amazing. She has someone accompanying her. She's not alone. And while she still goes to the underworld and has to suffer what she suffers, and I am aware I'm talking in the third person, I get it, she's not utterly alone, and that's something, and it's something really profound. So I'm grateful for that.
one of the people that in your memoir who goes with you and is with you from the very beginning, of course, is your sister, Adina.
Yeah.
And you write that when you introduce us more vividly to her and your relationship with her, your remarkable relationship with your sister, you write that she was the center of your family, the center of your life, and she's in the center of the memoir.
Yes.
Can you bring us into your relationship with
We're
and also the grief, the piece of navigating grief and depression and how those informed each other?
So we're 5 children and 2 boys and 3 girls, and Adina is the middle. My sister passed away in 2008, a week after her 50th birthday. I think that there's a lot of confusion about grief and depression. There are ways in which they seem very similar, certainly in the great sorrow and the darkness and the crying, but they're also profoundly different. I was talking to a colleague, and we were talking about this point, and she was kind of pushing me on it. And I said to her, well, just take as a given that there is medication you can take for depression. There's no medication for grief. You live with grief, and you continue to live with grief, and you do the best you can. And there is an effort in our society to pathologize grief. You know, if your grief goes on too long, or if it's too severe, or if it's too harsh. If you're expressing it,
right.
Then
except
something
at the funeral or
right.
at the grave.
You've got a time frame, and the time frame is what you need to go by. And we all know that there's lots of beauty in the time frame of grieving process in the Jewish tradition. But what if you don't go by that time frame, right. And 30 days, and then a year, and it's like, well, it's just not relevant for me. And there's an additional element of losing a sister, and I'm sure my siblings can attest to this also, is that there's a hierarchy of grief in our culture, in Jewish culture, in Israeli culture for sure, and sibling grief is pretty low. There's not much space for sibling grief.
But the highest grief in the pecking order is parents or child.
The highest grief is, chas v'shalom, is parents for their children. And there's a place for grief for your parents. There's a lot of respect for a person who has lost his mother or father. There's a lot of space for that. There's very little space for sibling grief. We see that also in the Israeli military. There's been a lot of talk about that. There's a term for it. It's disenfranchised grief, and it just. It's like not acceptable, So get on with it. You have your partner, you have your children. Your sibling grief can't be that severe. So, and as you can see, I chose not to talk about my relationship with my sister. Yes.
Yeah. So read about it.
Yeah, read about it. It's there. It's the middle chapter. When I received one of the versions back and forth with a lovely copy editor I was working with, it was almost the final version. They had taken off the chapter numbers. I reacted very severely. I was like, "You can't do that. You can't take off a chapter." And I react severely to these kinds of things. But there are 7 chapters, and the 7 chapters matter. And Dina is at the middle. I said, "You have to put the chapter numbers back." And he was okay.
She's the chiasm, right? So that she's the center of the chiasm.
She is the center.
Yeah,
she's the center.
The Briach HaTichon.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So the image of you crying, though, especially as a rabbi, in rabbinic literature, if there's one person that we would think of who cries, it would be Joseph.
Joseph.
Right? Joseph's a crier in the Bible.
Joseph's a crier.
And Rachel.
Rachel,
Rachel,
מבכה על בניה.
Rachel מבכה.
מבכה על בניה.
So your crying is ever present in your memoir.
Yes, it is.
You even compare it to, or you can, what is it? Is it a stalactite?
It's a stalactite.
A stalactite.
But it's not my image. It's
No, it's the
Andrew
image.
Solomon's.
Andrew Solomon's
and I
image.
took it from him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I cry a lot.
And do you still cry a lot?
I cry all the time.
We were crying in the back.
We were
for
crying in the back
just-
there. I cry
so-
all the time.
So I'm sure everybody, people who know Rachel know she's crying all the time.
All the time.
Okay.
I
Is it hard to walk through the world in such an exposed way? Do you think? Is it a unique? Is your crying something that you remember from before the depression began?
No.
Oh,
No.
from when the
No.
depression began?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember. I maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't remember. It's not a memory of mine. No, not at all. But from living with depression and onward, it's all the time. And it's. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience. It is not in my control. I mean, it's genuinely not in my control. And so at some point you kind of just surrender to it, which is, I think it might be in the book where a neighbor comes to the door and I'm in not a very good state. He's come to give me back a book and I'm just weeping and he's kind of freaks out and he thinks that he should call somebody because I say, no, Iran, it's okay. I'm just crying. It's like, the administrative assistant in my graduate studies who would come into the office and would find me weeping. And I would say, it's okay. Just, get used to it. It's not, it's okay.
It's just me.
It's just me. It's just me.
That's the way I am.
And, I wear contacts and for years and years I used to struggle with them. And my ophthalmologist told me that the problem was that I cry too much and my tears are dirty, which I took offense at,
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like my tears are,
That's
pure.
not okay.
But not okay.
That's not okay.
But, so.
And so,
Yeah.
if you were to just to situate us here, the book is essentially this raw, very honest portrayal of somebody who, on the outside, as you are here, sitting on the stage, the 92nd Street Y, highly functioning, highly successful, laughing, charming, all these wonderful things. But is the point of the book there are many points of the book, and even maybe there's no point, but the message is as well that you can be all of these things and still be a schmata at times, sometimes completely and totally, curling up at the balls. That's still a reality for you and for anyone who has struggled with depression. Where would you say you are with your depression at this point?
So I'm not fond of the schmata image.
Okay, I saw that too.
It's like not going to work for me.
No schmata. I should have known better. What would be
schmata's not going to work.
Right.
Okay.
Feeling like you can't
So
perform or function.
So one of the things which is kind of extraordinary to me, I don't know if it's the case here, but it's certainly the case where I live, is that there is still a stigma around depression. It might be the case here, but so one of the things that I want that I want this book to offer is one more representation that is unapologetic, because people are saying to me, like in my community, well, how can you expose yourself that way? How can you talk like this? And I think, well, did I kill anybody? Did I do something? It doesn't feel. If I were writing a book about living with cancer, would people feel that I was exposing myself? Would people feel that I had, stepped over some line? And I kind of feel like that's where I wanted to go. That, I've lived with depression for 34 years. I treat it as best I can. I often fail. I've left an indelible mark on people closest to me. I wish I could do some things over. I hope I keep on finding ways to maybe be less sad. You know, I'm treated, and I listen to my, primarily my oldest son, who's in the world of therapy and is touching on all different types of therapeutic modalities that I know nothing about, and he's opening up that world, and I know that there's, you know, so much there that if I were a little bit braver, if I were a little bit more adventurous, maybe I could also touch and integrate.
You mean psychedelic work?
Oh,
or
God,
medicine?
yes.
Why not?
But not only.
Oh, yeah.
Not only. Also psychedelic, but also just different type of therapeutic modalities.
Somatic
yeah,
modalities.
Lots of that definitely everything to do with the body and how trauma and depression live in the body, and you know,
right. The work of Bessel van der Kolk and others who have been talking about trauma. I think when I was reading your book, where I get stuck in my own, because my journey is also 20 years or 30 some odd years of this space, is that on the one hand, the elements of your book are locating your depression in chemistry, in the brain, and then there's a part of your story that's also, of course, about origins that are more narratively focused and more focused on events or gestalts that were formative for you at various points. And obviously, it's not either or. Right. But when you're in that, the stigma sometimes will be, when you compare it to cancer, or when I've compared it to cancer or to other elements, it's almost impossible, though, for that analogy to work completely, because I mean, that's not entirely true, because there are environmental causes, obviously, for cancer as well. So it actually it's closest, and yeah, I agree with you. And certainly reading the book, one can't not read the book. One can't read the book, and not be awed by your power in the book, the power of your imagery, the power of your mind, the power of your heart, and to have that living side by side with these moments of great vulnerability that are normally stigmatized, really itself is remarkable. Like, just to see, on the same page, these things that are usually not juxtaposed, I thought was very inspiring to me personally, and I can imagine reading someone else reading it. So where do we go from here for your? Where do you want this book to go next?
Where do I want the book? Oh, I want it to be a bestseller on the New York Times
list,
list,
great.
right?
Let's make it happen. It's going to be a bestseller.
And then to be made into a Paramount picture, okay?
Where's Oprah? We have to talk to Oprah. She sometimes is here. Maybe we can give her a free book when she walks out.
Where do I want it? It really, really, I want it to, depression is really lonely. It's a really, really lonely place. And I also want to say that living beside someone with depression is also really lonely and really, really hard, and needs also to be acknowledged. And I'm talking, of course, about Yanni, my life partner, and being mothered by a mother with depression is really, really hard. And what I want the book to do is to just acknowledge all of that for people who are feeling under-acknowledged or unacknowledged, and maybe offer them a little bit of companionship. Mm-hmm. And, you're not alone. You're not alone. No.
Is there an excerpt from the book that you'd like to read to us? I think I'm just so blown away.
Can I read an excerpt that's, there's nothing funny in the book. Absolutely. I don't do humor. And this extract is also not funny, but it's kind of light. It's also not light, but I'm going to read it, okay? But I'm going to read it also because it's short, and I think that it will serve at this moment, okay? So, So it's a cairn. I'm sorry, it's a cairn. It's cairn 13. It's spring 2019. So it's a thing with me that, of course, Persephone comes back in the spring, but I go into depression in the spring. It's also when my birthday is, so... Late spring, another depression. Again, just as the wildflowers sprout up across all the hills and the days start getting longer, darkness descends on me. The medication I'm on isn't working. The floor has fallen away. The world is the black abyss. The repetitiveness of it all is devastating and boring in equal measure. Yoni sets up an appointment with a young psychiatrist he's recently met, someone new. I'm resistant. Why bother? But the appointment is set, and coming up with an excuse for not going feels like more effort than just going. So I make my way to her clinic, located in a neighboring city in a dingy building with narrow and dirty hallways. I'm expecting more darkness. But then I'm shown into her office, which is bright and welcoming. She's a short and round woman with curly hair and a very broad smile, younger than I am by at least 15 years. Her name is Lior, light to me. She asks me the necessary questions. I give the regular answers as though by rote, crying incessantly as I speak. I'm in the same fog of despair, made no less unbearable by its familiarity. In that fog, I feel myself at a great distance from everyone, even from this psychiatrist sitting very close to me. It's the distance one feels in darkness, the distance of being cut off and feeling entirely alone. Voices may reach one, but disembodied as they are, they seem to come from outer space, an alien realm unconnected to oneself and unable to help. Still, something in her roundness and gentle voice does reach me. She says, I can see how much you are suffering. We'll move quickly to change this. No, there's no point to talk therapy now. We must find now the right antidepressant, then we'll figure out the rest. She gives me her number and says I should call if I need to. She gives me the prescription and tells me to come back in a month. Then she says this to me. And now you must promise me the following. After you fill the script in the pharmacy, you are to walk to the bakery at the end of the block. You are to sit down and order for yourself a cup of coffee and one of their extraordinary baked goods. I know you don't want to, but still, promise me you will. You live with depression. That's so hard. You deserve some sweetness. You must give yourself sweetness. It is perhaps the most unexpected instruction I have ever received from a mental health professional. It stays with me for its unexpectedness, its light touch, and its simple kindness. It stays with me also because it felt informed by her really seeing me, not only as a patient in need of new medication, but as a person suffering in the world. In her seeing me thus, and insisting I eat something sweet to cut through the salt of so many tears, this curly-haired psychiatrist, almost young enough to be my daughter, was enveloping me in a mother's embrace.
Wow.
Yeah. I like that.
That was beautiful. I'm reminded of that when I was in my darkest period of my life. I was an ultra-Orthodox kid, and I was living in my parents' home. I moved home, and I was in the midst of a very, very dark period, and I wasn't coming out of my room at all. And my sister, who was living at home as well, my older sister, each morning would leave a Post-it note on my door. And it was like a Post-it of sweetness. And she would quote a verse from Psalms or something and say, you know, you deserve something happy today. And as you read that, I just thought of that had I had dark-robed mother, then that would have been a great gift to give to me in that moment of my life, to say there are scenes like that one, which is an invitation to sweetness, an invitation to go to the end of the block. And I know you don't want to, but to buy yourself, you know, something sweet.
Something sweet.
So I just wanted to thank you. We're very honored that you came here to the Y to speak for an hour about a book that I'm going to be suggesting this book to everyone I know, and hoping that they read it and are touched in a way that I was by your stories and by your honesty and by an invitation to think about the ways in which we stigmatize people who are depressed and who have depression and who are struggling with that and also showing up in remarkable ways. I know that you have so many fans here, but I feel like this book will be an entree for me to read more of your books and more of the things that you
poetry.
The poetry. The poetry. And I just wanted to I hope that it's incredibly successful in meeting what you wanted it to be in the world. And I just thank you and thank all of you for coming tonight for this conversation.
Thank you.